Hello, you've reached Gloria with Farmstead Talk, and I am here today with Rachel with One Hawk Homestead. And Rachel is representing her state of Delaware in this homesteading interview today. Welcome, Rachel, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Gloria.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So would you like to share with the folks where they can find you on social media?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram under the name One_Hawk_Homestead, and then on Facebook as well as One Hawk Homestead.
Okay, and do you have a website you'd like to share?
Yes, the website is www.onehawkhomestead.wordpress.com.
Okay, very good. So Rachel, tell me a little bit about yourself and your family makeup.
So it's my husband and me, and we have 4 kids. My husband and I are Gen Xers. That gives you a kind of an age range. And our 4 kids are ages 4 to 19. We have 2 girls. They're our bookends. So our youngest daughter's 4, our oldest daughter is 19, and then 2 boys in the middle, 11 and 14 years old. My husband and I both come from engineering backgrounds, so very technical work. And you probably will be able to see some of that in some of my answers today when we talk about how I got to where I got and things I've been doing here.
Okay. So tell me where you're currently living and a little bit about that community and the population and maybe the culture there.
So we live in the Amish part of Dover, and Dover is the capital of Delaware, so it's a pretty big spread. It does include some urban areas, but where we are is not urban at all. It's pretty rural. It used to be a lot more rural, but within the past 10 to 15 years, there's been an influx of population from out of state, and during that time, some of the Amish have actually been leaving as well because of the increase in traffic and so forth. But where we are, we're fortunate to still be in an area that's fairly rural. Our neighbors are Amish. The house we live in was built by the Amish. And we live next to an Amish school.
Sounds nice. So describe your property, if you will, kind of paint a picture of what your property looks like.
So we have about 2.5 acres, and when we got this property from the Amish family, they obviously had been tending it for their own needs, but then they cleared it at the time of sale, and so it was very much a blank slate. I mean, there might have been maybe 4 trees on the property. For 2.5 acres, that's not much. It was very blank. And so it's been everything that I can do to, bring some life back to it, something other than crabgrass. So that's what I've been working on is the past 10 years, bringing life to it.
Yeah, and you've done quite a job with that property. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Tell a little bit about the name of your homestead and the story behind that, or the meaning behind that.
So this was in 2016. I was working in government at the time, and you recall 2016 was an election year. And I had been working in government for several years. And I was, when I tell this story, it surprises people because I was working on what sounds like very technical work. I was working on energy efficiency and energy conservation, green building projects, all those sorts of things, building codes. It all sounds like very technical work, but in an election year, everything becomes political fodder. And a lot of the chain of command leaves during an election year, because they foresee the administration is going to change and they move on and pursue other things. And so the people who are left behind at the agencies can become very vulnerable. And that was the position I found myself in 2016. And I had been working for almost 20 years. I was terrified of losing my job. We had 4 kids. I had no idea what I would do if I wasn't working. And my routine every morning, and had been for a while, was to go out to the garden, and I would go out to the garden for about an hour before I went into work and just kind of ground myself and, kind of clear my head and take a look at what was going on out there, just kind of take it all in. And I remember it was November of 2016, so it was right around the election. And I went out there and I was just a nervous wreck. I was so worried about what was happening. And I happened to turn around and look up, and in a tree that looks right over our main garden, there was this hawk sitting in the tree. And I just had this immediate sense that no matter what happened, it was going to be okay. And I don't really know how to explain it, but I just knew. And I saw that hawk pretty much every day for months after that. And during that time, I did end up unemployed. A lot of the people in my agency did, actually. And I was scared. I was very scared. But I had that sense that it was going to be okay. And every time I saw the hawk, it was like a reminder that this is going to be okay. And so when I decided to turn what I was doing here into something that I could share with the community, I named it after that hawk.
That's so nice. I love that. You mentioned to me before that you had decided to go back to school for a degree in environmental science. And how did that actually impact what you're doing today on the homestead?
So that decision, that was actually back with the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. And I was working in engineering at the time. And where I was working, there were cuts. People were let go, like a lot of people were let go. And again, I had that terror of not having a job. And I thought, well, if I end up being cut, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? I felt like I wasn't very diversified. And so I said, well, I better go back to school and just make sure I have something that I can pull from. And at the same time, I'm thinking, I'm working full time. We have kids. If I'm going to put myself and our family through that, it's going to be for something that I really believe is worth that experience of, going through that. And so I decided to pursue environmental science. I felt like that was something that was worthwhile. And so I was going to school full-time, working full-time parenting. I was a zombie for probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had a lot on your plate.
But how it influenced or impacted me and the family and what I'm doing with the homestead now is it really helped me have a more whole view, a holistic view. When you get into those environmental sciences, it's really looking at the systems of things, how things that might seem unrelated really are related. And so I started looking at things like our diet and our health and, our outdoor experiences, just all of those sorts of things really started to come much clearer into focus, not only for me as an individual, but as a parent. And then, for what we wanted to do here with the property, one of the first things that I did after that was I started working toward getting this property certified as a wildlife habitat. So it is a certified wildlife habitat. We have a certified butterfly garden. And it wasn't until several years after that that I started growing food. And that environmental science degree really prepared me for that mindset of still wanting to tie things together, bring it all together. And I didn't know how. nobody was doing these things when I was growing up. I didn't see any examples of bringing those things together. And I came across permaculture, and I had that aha moment of, this is what I was looking for. This brings it all together. This ties everything together.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was able to grow food, and still am growing food in a way that does not compromise the wildlife at all. In fact, they're very much a part of what I'm doing here. I rely on them very heavily.
So with that, what type of gardens are you growing right now, and what methods are you using?
Our main garden is close to 5,000 square feet now, and it is very much a permaculture forest garden. It's an edible forest garden. And we have smaller gardens throughout the property. They're also that forest garden concept. And so what that is you're using trees and shrubs and other perennials as anchors in the landscape. And then you grow around those. And the idea is that over time it fills in with perennials. You start out though with little stick babies, and so there's a lot of room for annuals. And so that's the past 5-6 years. That's been the progression of it gradually filling in. And in the meantime, I'm using those gaps for the annuals. A lot of annual vegetables, fruits, but the perennials are definitely starting to fill out now.
So do you think then there will always be a place for annuals in your garden?
Absolutely, because I couldn't live without the tomatoes. I would be sad.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the CSA that you started, how that came about.
So that actually goes back to when I was back in school for environmental science. One of the things I came across during my studies was the environmental harms that are associated with conventional agriculture. I mean, it just is. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. There are environmental harms. And so I was looking at some of the things that have been done to try to lessen that and to try to bring it back into a more environmentally conscious context. And one of the things I came across was community supported agriculture. And again, 10 years ago, I had never heard of that before. That was new to me. But when I came across that, I thought, wow, that's really intriguing. I mean, it's local. You're supporting, businesses right there in your community. You can see how it's grown, where it's grown. You can connect to it. I want that. And so I was a member of a CSA at another farm for a few years. And so I got that customer experience of, what's good, what's not so great, what works, what doesn't really work, what's too much. If you get a box full of corn, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with all this corn? And then, a few years went by and we started growing things here. I was growing things, and, my husband and I sort of got to this point of, well, we can do this. So I was growing for us at that point, and we weren't doing the CSA at the other farm. And then, I got to the point of being here full time, and he said, what would you think about doing a CSA here? Oh my gosh, I was so scared. I really was. And I didn't offer one for that whole first year. I just focused on producing for us. And I got a really good sense of what I could and couldn't do. And then I came back to the idea that next fall, and I said, I think I can do it. If I keep it small, I think I can do this. And so in 2018, I did offer for the first time a CSA, and we had 6 members in 2018. And then I offered it again last year, and we had 3 last year. And then I just opened it again this year for 2020, and we've already had people signing up. So Yeah, that's how I got to that place. I really enjoy it, and I find other people are enjoying it too. That reconnecting with your neighbors, really. People have gotten so isolated, and this brings it back together.
Yeah, I mean, it really came full circle for you. That's really nice. Um, Tell me what the pros and cons are of having a CSA.
Um, so the pros for a grower, I would say one of the major pros is that it's a guaranteed income. I do the farmers market also, and it's not a guaranteed income. There are weeks that people just don't show up as much. Maybe the weather's bad and so they stay home, or maybe the weather is great and so they go to the beach. They're not at the farmers market.
Right.
But with the CSA, you have a guaranteed income. You know what it's going to be. And it actually comes at a very thin time of year for a grower. You're getting that money during the winter. You don't have crops to bring in an income during that time of year. So those are two huge pros for a grower. Cons, we don't control the weather. So,
True.
As a grower, I've made a promise that I'm going to deliver every single week a certain value, a certain monetary value of crops for 20 weeks. And I'm still on the hook if we are drowning in rain. I'm still on the hook if it hasn't rained in 2 or 3 months. I'm still on the hook if we've had a week of 105-degree temperatures. So in that context, the stress sometimes can be a con. You have to really be able to just accept that stress is going to be part of it and get through it. And I will say that we have been very fortunate in not losing any of our crops in any of those circumstances. And I do think that the permaculture design, how I'm managing it here, has made a huge difference in that. The plants have been resilient. We've been able to get through it.
That's great. What a blessing that you haven't had any losses like that. What about, you told me about and I can't remember the name of the award that you won, I'm sorry, the Pennsylvania Growing Award, or what was it called?
So the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, they're the folks who put on the big Philadelphia Flower Show every year. I mean, it's a big to-do here on the East Coast. They put on every year what they call a gardening and greening contest. And they open it up to home gardeners, businesses that are kind of tinkering around with gardening things around their businesses, anybody who's essentially not a professional, right? They open it up to Pennsylvania, obviously, but then they also open it up to New Jersey and Delaware residents. And I can't tell you how I was so bold back in 2017. Yeah, 2017. It was when I first entered. I was terrified when they told me that they were going to send judges out here to come see it, because this is your baby and you love it dearly, and you just hope that other people are going to love it as much as you do. And I placed. I was amazed. I placed in 2017, and I've placed every year since then. I entered again in 2018 and in 2019. And last year, 2019, was a really special experience because one of my very close friends, she decided to enter her garden too. And so I got to cheer her on. And she actually has a very different kind of garden. So it wasn't like a competitive thing in any sense. And it turned out that we both were blue ribbon recipients at the end when we got the results back. So that was nice to be able to share that with her.
What an accomplishment. That's really nice. Something really to be proud of.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's change it up a little bit. If you, or do you have a favorite book, gardening book, that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, so there is definitely one. there are a few others I'd like to quickly mention, but the one for sure is Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemingway. And I have read Gaia's Garden at least once every year for the past 5-6 years at least, to the point that the binding is starting to fall apart. It's my go-to, and it's called the book is referred to as a guide to home-scale permaculture. And so it's something that you could apply within your own backyard, if your own front yard, if you didn't want to hide it. I mean, what we're doing is in the front yard. And it's very in-depth, very informative, but also very accessible. It doesn't feel like, very technically heavy. I mean, anybody could approach this book. And it's just a wealth of information. Every time I crack it open and read it, I feel like I read something new for the first time. So that would be my favorite. But a few others I do want to quickly mention would be The Holistic Orchard by Michael Phillips. And I recommend that one to anybody who wants to do fruit trees, fruiting shrubs like blueberries and so forth. You can grow those without sprays. I don't spray anything. And he walks you through how to do that. And a lot of it comes down to using like fermented herbal brews. Like weeds out in your yard are very nutritious for plants. They're plant medicine. And so he walks you through how to do that. He walks you through some of the things like building soil microbiology. So that's for anybody who wants to do fruiting trees and shrubs. It's The Holistic Orchard by Michael Phillips. I would also say Restoration Agriculture by Mark Shepard is another one. And I mention his in particular because he really gets down to the nitty-gritty of how do you make agriculture something that you can live off of, and specifically perennial agriculture. So he really focuses on his particular farm, hazelnuts, chestnuts, and so forth. But he walks you through how you can actually make a decent living off of agriculture, and you don't have to go millions of dollars into debt to do it. So I mentioned him. And the other one would be The Resilient Farm and Homestead by Ben Fall. He is a genius with water harvesting and earth shaping. And our property, a large part of it was underwater in 2018, and I wouldn't have saved what we were able to save if it weren't for his book.
Good information. Thank you for sharing that. How about religion and spirituality? Does that play a role in your homesteading life at all?
I wouldn't say religion, but spirituality, absolutely. And I hear people say no to that question, and for me, I can't wrap my head around a no answer. I mean, I walk out there and I see what to me are miracles all the time. I still get a kick out of a seed germinating and turning into this great big tree. I mean, that to me is a miracle. There's so much that goes on out here that I'm not doing. I couldn't do it. There's no way I'm doing that. And so I do absolutely believe there is a benevolent presence out there that has its hand on what's going on. And I give thanks for that all the time. I was thinking, one way I think you might get a more honest answer is if you ask people when they hit a rough patch in their homesteading, or if they hit a rough patch in their farming, do they pray? Because I know I pray. I pray, help me know how to get through this. I mean, when it's been 3 weeks of rain, I want to know what it is I got to do to get through that. And I don't have the resources myself. I pray. And there are sometimes during the year where we set aside a specific time for thankfulness or a specific time for mindfulness. The solstices and the equinoxes and those midpoints in between really give you, if you tune into those, it's really like turning into the rhythm of nature, and you get kind of connected to that pace. And the winter solstice in particular, I mention as a special time for us because the light coming back, I mean, there's hope in that. There really is. Winter can be a hard time for a lot of people because it's so dark, it's cold. But if you're mindful that the light is coming back, even if it's just a little bit each day, you know, there's a promise in that things are going to get better, that things are going to come back around. You just got to hold on a little bit longer. And the one other time I can say distinctly that we absolutely have a tradition every year is the beginning of May. So it's the midpoint between the spring equinox, which is when we do a ton of seeds, I mean hundreds and hundreds of seeds, and the summer solstice. And the summer solstice really is when you're starting to reap the benefits of all of that work. So that beginning of May is the midpoint. And we always go out to the backyard and we have a nice bonfire. We bring out some of the, you know, winter brush and trimmings and things and clear that out, use it in the bonfire. And so it's kind of a cleansing in a sense, but also, you know, asking for blessings on the growing season ahead. And the kids run around and they have marshmallows and there's music, and it's just a really nice time.
Sounds fun. Last question. So if you can sum up your experience with homesteading and what it's meant to you, what would that word be?
Of stewardship. And I really think that that's been how I would describe the homesteading community, and then also how I engaged with that, because starting out, I had no idea how to do any of this stuff. I mean, I didn't grow up doing it. My family wasn't doing it. I never saw anybody grow food or make things or live off the land. I had no idea. And so obviously I couldn't ask them because they didn't know either. But there was a community out there of people who did know and who were very generous with sharing their experiences and their lessons learned and, you know, their do's and don'ts. And I was able to learn pretty quickly because of that. And it's not just about, you know, that they were putting the information out there, but those people actually made themselves available to ask questions and to really engage with them and learn from them very directly. One of the people I learned the most from in the beginning was Terry Page. And some people will know that name from the blog Homestead Honey. And I worked pretty closely with her for probably a couple of years. And she really walked me through a lot of things. So I'm definitely in her debt for that. And you know, realizing that I've then tried to be a resource for other people as well, help them, you know, because they're in the same position we were. They didn't grow up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It takes a community. It takes a village, right?
Yeah.
It takes a village. So, Rachel, thank you so much for this interview. It's been lovely. So, thank you again. Thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you too.